There are many different types of guns: rifles, shotguns, machine guns, revolvers, and pistols, to name a few. Historically, Americans typically owned firearms for hunting, and for most of the last century, rifles and shotguns far outpaced the sale of handguns in America. But today, Americans say their single largest reason for buying a gun is self-defense. Handguns are now the gun of choice in America, particularly ones designed to be concealed. Concealed carry, as it's called, is legal in all 50 states, and today an estimated 13 million Americans are licensed to carry a concealed weapon. That's more than 12 times the number of police officers and detectives. So how did so many Americans start carrying guns in everyday life? Well, the story doesn't start in the Old West. It starts in the late 1970s. In 1977, at the National Rifle Association's annual meeting, a faction of conservative activists led by Harlan Carter seized control. Carter pivoted the NRA away from the traditional focus on hunting and sportsmanship and transformed the organization into a political vehicle for the modern gun rights movement. Hunting was declining as more people lived in cities, and the number of households with a hunter has dropped by nearly 50% in the last 4 decades. The American gun industry survived this decline by selling more guns for carrying in everyday life. The narrative of the gun industry was changing. Some of the most dedicated gun rights activists went from saying this in 1967.
There is absolutely no reason why out on the street today a civilian should be carrying a loaded weapon,
to this in 2016.
If we had guns on the other side, it wouldn't have been that way. I would have, boom.
In 1987, the refashioned NRA successfully lobbied lawmakers in Florida to relax the rules for concealed carry. Under the new system, officials had no choice but to issue a permit to anyone applying who was considered mentally fit and not convicted of a violent felony. Similar laws were eventually adopted in 24 other states, and today all 50 states allow concealed carry, but only 28 require actual training with a gun. It was now easier to get a license to carry a concealed weapon than ever before. Gunmakers took to marketing their products as pocket guns with maximum concealability. But there was a problem with selling guns for self-defense. America was becoming a less dangerous place. Violent crime peaked in 1991 during the crack cocaine era, and has dropped by nearly half since then. But when you ask people if crime is declining, they often think the opposite, that it's going up. One reason for this misperception is the emphasis that news places on random, spectacular crimes. A study of news reports from Los Angeles stations in 2009 found that local broadcasts often began with crime stories that weren't even in Los Angeles. It's easy to see why people can feel as if the biggest thing happening most days is something terrible.
About this 4-person crime wave of carjackings, robberies, burglaries, and assaults.
The gun-carrying revolution took a big step forward in 1992 when a Los Angeles jury acquitted 4 police officers of using excessive force in the beating of Rodney King. The city erupted in riots, and the events were televised.
We will have more on the situation in Los Angeles.
A new market for self-defense guns was born, and it was infused with racial anxiety.
The criminals laughed at their laws. That tells me guns are not the problem. Criminals are. And it's time to ban the problem. If we need more police, let's hire them. If we need tougher prosecutors and judges, let's appoint them. If we need more prisons, let's build them. But let's ask our lawmakers to ban the rights of criminals, not the constitutional rights of American citizens.
In the late 90s, the gun industry was facing another problem. More than 30 local and state governments were suing gun manufacturers. But in 2005, Congress stepped in and passed the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which immunized gun manufacturers, distributors, and dealers from civil liability for damages caused by their products.
Right, that Protection and Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which is one of the cornerstone achievements of the ILA, is probably the only reason we have a U.S. firearms industry anymore.
Today, the largest U.S. gunmaker, Smith & Wesson, underwrites several NRA initiatives, including The Armed Citizen, a column that celebrates stories of civilians who draw their guns in self-defense. Gun sales surge in reaction to 3 kinds of events: mass shootings, terrorist attacks, and talk of gun control. When I talked to many people this spring about why they carry concealed weapons, they often said that they feel, above all, a sense of vulnerability to terrorists, to mass shooters, to ordinary criminals. They know that carrying a gun is a risk of its own, but it's a risk that they are willing to take. In all, Americans today have accumulated 310 million firearms, and the number continues to grow. The future of carrying guns isn't clear. In 2008, the Supreme Court awarded a victory to gun owners, ruling in District of Columbia versus Heller that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual right to self-defense within the home. However, the court left open the question of how far that extends into public places. Many legal experts say this is the next great frontier for the Second Amendment. For now, Americans live among a self-appointed, well-armed, and lightly trained militia.